Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for having me here. Looking forward to the session with you guys. So just by way of introduction, my name's David Rabinowitz. I'm a strategy consultant by trade, and that has kind of led me into the world of coaching. And then, if you think about strategy and coaching, a lot of that has to do with decision making. And so I found this interest in strategic decision making. Strategy is really a collection of decisions that an organization might make, or that even a country might make. And then, coaching is a lot of discussions for individuals about their decisions that they're making and that impact their lives. So that's what we're here to talk about this morning. I'm going to jump straight into it. Let me share my screen. Okay, and everyone should be able to see that, but I do have a second screen here, and so you all should, I can see you guys. So yeah, just we're going to do this over the 2 days in 2 basic sections. So the first day, we're actually going to be focusing mainly on fundamentals of strategic decision making. And then on the second day, we're going to touch a little bit today on the frameworks and processes. And then on the second day, which is next week, Tuesday, we are going to actually take those frameworks and processes, explore them a bit more, and then apply the learnings to that. And then there'll be some further reading as well. Just some of the house rules: be present. And yeah, do understand that things are happening in the background. So if there is a need to go, please go. But if you can be present as much as possible, that will really help and also aid in your learning. And then, yeah, please ask questions. So if you want to unmute and jump in, or use the hand function, or put it in the chat, the admins will be monitoring the chat. And then, yeah, as with all learning, please enjoy the uncertainty. We are going to be exploring some new areas and topics today that I think people aren't very familiar with. And so we're going to jump in with that. So what I'd like you to do is think through, and I'm going to ask you to capture these. So number one, what is the best decision that you made in the last year? What is the worst decision that you made in the last year? And what is one decision that you are facing in the near to medium term? So just think about those. What I'd like you to do is to go on to 𝗪𝗇.com and have a look at, if you go onto this website, 𝗪𝗇.com, you will be asked to type in a code. And then if you type in that code there, 52535691, then you will be able to put those in. So take a little bit of time, think about that. I will be able to see when those start coming up. You should be able to do that now. Anyone struggling with 𝗪𝗇?
Ellis, if you're there, you want to talk about your mentees? David, I apologize. Admin is still battling to switch on to open the cameras to everybody. Just give us a moment.
Okay,
and then I'm sure
no
it'll
problem.
be a little bit easier to interact. We'll be able to see who's in the room. I do apologize, David.
No problem at all. All good. I see some responses starting to come through here. So I'm actually going to... and I think you'll only be able to see... You'll only be able to do one question at a time. It is all anonymous, so don't worry. We won't be able to see exactly who said what. Best decision: to let go of the worst decisions. There's been so many. To do the 𝗙𝗵𝘃 Leadership Development Program. Working with DR. Well, I wonder who that could be. Maybe there's another DR on this call. Build a team, staff my organization. As you think through these, did any of these, and you can either speak up or put them in the chat, did any of these have a negative outcome? Were any of these good decisions that had a bad outcome? See some shaking of the head. Okay. Choice of range to sell. I'm assuming that's in a business. Okay. You can still do that. I'd like you to now think about what was the worst decision that you made. So again, stay on that Menti. It should go to the next slide now. And you should be able to think about what was the worst decision you made. This one might be a little bit difficult. You are working against all your biases because have you ever been to one of those talks or something where someone said, oh, this happened, and actually it was the best thing that ever happened to me? Often that's what's called confirmation bias or motivated reasoning. And often we look back at decisions, it's hard for us to say we made a bad decision. No one in this group made bad decisions. Enforcing discipline on my kid. Amazing. Yes, it's hard. I'm going to take a guess that that's a teenage kid, because it's really difficult to know with teenagers. Should you be more gentle? Should you be more disciplinarian, etc.? Trusting someone to do something that I can do. Acting in a way that did not align to my principles. Okay. Would you agree that most of these have negative outcomes? Sounds like this is the first time in my life so far my decisions have been good ones in the last year. Amazing. Well done, whoever that is. Okay. Any more coming through there? Let's go on to the next one. You can keep a track of that. What are some decisions that you're facing over the next year? It can be personal decisions, work decisions, family decisions. What are some of the things that you're facing over the next year? And this is important to think about. I really would encourage you to do this, because we're going to use these as examples as we go through the course. And specifically, I'm going to be asking you in the second day, next week on Tuesday, to actually work through this decision. Ellis, is that a decision framework behind you? You're on mute, by the way. You have to unmute if you're going to tell me, but it looks like some type of a decision framework there. You're going to have to unmute. Can't hear you.
David?
Yes.
If you, the camera prompt is open. Everybody can put their cameras on now. You just have to accept the prompt, please. So you can allow your cameras on, please.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Helene. Sorry, Ellis, you were saying?
It's a workflow. I have a workflow engine that I sell.
Okay, amazing. Cool. So let's see here. 2 responses for decisions that we're facing. Company continuity or to close down. Massive decision. Should we carry on with this? Whether to relocate to another country for career growth or to stay. Work-life balance. Interesting. What are some of the other decisions that we're facing? What to have for breakfast. Move houses. For those in Joburg, should we move to Cape Town? For those in Cape Town, should we move to Israel? For those in Israel, should we, let's not go there. So lots of decisions there. Okay. Keep thinking through those. And again, just as we go through it this morning, think through how the concepts that we're going to talk about apply to these challenges. I'm going to leave this one open so that you can keep submitting that as we go. But what I would like to do is say, why is decision making so important? So for me, this quote by 𝗏𝗁 really sums it up. 𝗏𝗁 is a professor at the University of Texas, and that's I did a couple of courses through the University of Texas there, and specifically on decision making. And in South Africa, we've got quite an underdeveloped decision making culture, especially in large organizations. Having worked as a consultant for about
20 years, there's many organizations that you'll end up working with, banks, insurers, large industrial companies. In general, decision-making is something that's just done relatively informally, either by a board. And when I say informally, people might think it's very formal, but I'll give you an example. When I was doing the one course, there was a guy who was virtually sitting next to me in the room, who told me that he worked at a pharmaceutical company in Texas. They had 20 decision analysts working for 6 months on one decision. So if you think about what it takes to make a decision, if you're going to say, well, should we back this $1 billion drug or that $1 billion drug? Or in the energy space, are we going to dig this mine shaft over here or over there? You need a lot of data, a lot of insights, a lot of processes in order to make sure that you're making the right decision. But for each of us, if you look back on your life and you think back at some of the decisions that people spoke about now, moving country, getting married, having children, opening a company, closing down a company, all those types of things are decisions that absolutely impact our lives. And what's surprising about this is that we, as a society, as a country, don't spend a lot of time on teaching people skills on how to make better decisions. So we study maths, we study biology, we study science, etc. And there is a big push to include a lot of critical thinking in our education systems. And a lot of adult education then needs to come along and go, okay, but how do we actually make good decisions? So if it's a really important skill, my thesis is we should be studying it and we should be learning how to do it well. So what I want to take you through this morning, and again, please stop me if there are any questions, just some of the fundamental concepts of strategic decision making. It's some of the things that I find personally have changed my outlook on things. It's something that I utilize every day in the decisions I make. And yeah, let's jump into it. So first of all, now that people do have their cameras on, do you prefer the table on the left or the right? If you prefer the table on the left, hold up a 1. And if you prefer the table on the right, hold up a 2. Okay, we've got a 1, a 2, another 1, some 2s. Okay. If you think this is a optical illusion, because no good talk is good without an optical illusion, you can hold up a 3. Okay. Anyway, this is an optical illusion. They're the exact same table. So these things are called shepherd tables. You don't have to take my word for it. You can go look for it. You can go look it up online. But basically, that shape is exactly the same as the other one. What happens, though, is that when our brains look at things in the world, our brains are structured in such a way that they need to make sense of the world. So when you see a table and you see that the legs are short in comparison to the length of the table, what that's telling you is that you need to go the long way around the table and make your way that way, as opposed to if they're slightly longer, then the table would be a different dimension. And that's how our brains construct the world in order to get around these things. Now, one of the reasons why I like this particular one is because even when you know it, you still can't see it. One of the most important aspects of decision-making is to realize that people have other perspectives, and there are other perspectives in the world that even if you understand them and you know them and research them, you still won't be able to see them. So when I first saw this, it was in a book. I went and I photostated the page and I cut it out because I didn't believe it. And so I cut out this little shape, and again, it's like, even though I know that those are the same tables, I can't see it. So fundamental concept number 1 is perspectives. And it's when taking any decision, there are multiple perspectives that need to be taken into account, and to understand that sometimes we're not going to be able to relate to those perspectives. Okay. Fundamental concept number 2. What makes a good decision? And here I'd like to ask people to unmute and speak up. When you thought about the good decisions that you made earlier, what what were you thinking about that made it a good decision? Let's pick Nicole, because you work with certain people and I haven't met you yet.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I think what makes a good decision is, as you say, getting other people's perceptions, to do analysis and from the data, and also to trust your gut sometimes in doing that, to set goals and have a good objective in mind, and then take it forward from there.
Would you be okay sharing with us what you felt your good decision was?
I did. So I joined the 𝗙𝗵𝘃 Leadership Development Program, and it's been the most incredible decision. There's been incredible faculty who have broadened my strategic outlook and given me new tools, getting to know people within the community who do have very different perspectives, and to take those on board and help in my personal growth. And yeah, it's been a really great decision, and working with Viv has been amazing. She's a visionary, and it's such a privilege.
Amazing. Yeah. So if I were to split what you said into two categories, there's two things you basically spoke about. The one was the process, and the other one was the outcome. So the process of the decision was the analysis, the perspectives, understanding your goals, what it is that you want, etc. So I want to broaden my horizon. I want to work with these types of people, etc. And then it's the outcome. So the process and the outcome. The outcome, you're saying, has been very positive because the things that you wanted have come true. You're working with Viv. She's amazing, etc., etc. Okay. And so in every decision, you can split out these two things, the process that you're going to have and then the outcome. Which of those do you control?
The process.
The process.
The process, right? You can't control the outcome. So it could have been that you could have done all the analysis, gotten all the good perspectives, really thought about your purpose in life and your goals and what it is you want to achieve, and done research on the 𝗙𝗵𝘃 institution and interviewed people and taken time, etc., and made the decision. And then something bad could have happened that was unpredicted, and it could have been a disaster, right? Thankfully, it hasn't been. So this is a lady I'd like to introduce you to. Her name is Annie Duke. She's got a book called Thinking in Bets. I'm busy reading her next book, which is called How to Decide. Also a very good book. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's in that book next week. One of the things she says is that what makes a decision great is not that it has a great outcome. It's fundamentally built into our psyche to evaluate decisions by their outcome. We say, oh, it was a great decision because things turned out well, or because I'm now happy, etc. We don't go, oh, it was a great decision, but it turned out really badly. And so this is a concept called resulting. So when you make a decision at that point in time, because you don't control the outcome, what that means is that there's some level of uncertainty. There's some level of, I don't know a certain amount. Now, we do enough analysis and introspection in order to try, think through things, predict, understand, etc. But there's always that little bit of that's missing and that's uncertain. And, because what we're trying to do, as she says here, is accurately represent our own state of knowledge. So we think that if we go work at the 𝗙𝗵𝘃 Leadership Institute, we are, there's, let's say, an 80% chance or 90% chance, or, well, Viv's there, 99% chance that this is going to be a hugely positive move in my life. And, but, you're not sure. And so what happens is that and Annie Duke got this from playing poker. So she was and this is why she's over here. So she's a world champion poker player turned behavioral economist. And she now writes papers with Daniel Kahneman and people like that. And, what she said was that when they were playing poker, they would look back at the hands that they played. They would do it in a group, and they would analyze the games afterwards. And afterwards, what they would say is, look, I made this decision based on these reasons, and it turned out well, and therefore I think it was the right decision. And sometimes her colleagues would take her on, and they'd say, no, actually, you made a bad decision. You just got lucky. Because there's always those two parts of a decision. There's the skill, the stuff that you're doing, the analysis, the introspection, etc. And then there's a little bit of luck. And we have to attribute the right things to the right places. So it could be that in her case, her colleagues were saying to her, look, actually, if you think about it, you didn't know what that other player had, and they could have had this card, and therefore the fact that they had low cards meant that you won, and actually you just got lucky. The opposite is also true, because sometimes what happened was she said, look, she was really hard on herself. I really should have done better. I lost this hand. And they said, no, actually, in that circumstance, you made the right decision, but because of something you couldn't have known, it turned out badly. So what happens is that one of the ways to represent this is thinking about process and outcome in decisions. So, you know, what we want in life is deserved success. We want to believe that we are good decision makers. One of the difficulties in selling decision services is that no one thinks that they're bad at decision making. Everyone thinks that they're tremendously fantastic at it, including myself. But, you know, we all want deserved success. We all want to have this good process and get a good outcome. The problem is that life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes you have a good process and it happens. Bad things happen despite how much effort and energy and thinking you put into it. And then sometimes there's dumb luck. Sometimes people, and this is often even more frustrating, especially for those of us who like to make very rational decisions, and you see people make poor decisions and get lucky, that can be very frustrating. Any questions on that? Nope? Cool. Moving on. So fundamental concept number 1, perspectives. Fundamental concept number 2, resulting, evaluating things by their results. Let's talk about a couple of biases. So there are, as far as I know, over 180 classified biases. You know, it started in the 1970s with Daniel Kahneman. If you read his very difficult book to read, Thinking Fast and Slow, you can explore all the different biases and how that whole area of behavioral economics came to be. If you would like a much lighter version of the exact same book, Michael Lewis has one called The Undoing Project, and he goes through that. But you know, since then, there's about 180 biases that we've had. Now, again, let's think, what is a bias? Bias is, as we think about it, it's a leaning that you have in your mind towards something that doesn't reflect reality. Okay, so let's talk through a couple of these. I'm not going to go through a lot of them just because we don't have that much time today. Just by the way, this is normally either a half-day or full-day course that I run, so there is a whole bunch of material that is hidden, but I do just want to talk about a couple of these things just to give us a flavor for it. Okay, so the first one I want to talk through is this planning fallacy. And also, just by the way, the reason I've got this iceberg here is because you know, at the top is all the stuff that we think we know, and this is where we live and we have our conscious lives, and underneath are all these other things that are governing our behavior and causing us to act in certain ways. And what the whole area of behavioral economics has uncovered is, what are all these things and how can we be more aware of them? So I want to talk to you about the planning fallacy. It's one of my favorites. You know, there's two types of people in this world, right? There's people who are absolutely on time for everything. In fact, most of the time they're 5 minutes early. And then there's people who are consistently late, and for some reason, they always marry each other. So in every relationship, you always have those two people, right? And it can be very frustrating for both those people because, anyway, I won't go too much into it. Now, you'd think that maybe on a kind of smaller scale, you know, when things doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if you get to the party on time or not, not really. What about when things really matter? What about mega projects? So the Sydney Opera House, or the Concorde, or the Olympics, or Boston's Big Dig, for anyone who was in Boston at that time, right? They basically dug up all the roads in Boston over a good 10-year process, right? And this is all over the world. America, Europe, Far East, good friends at Eskom at home, right? They told us it was going to be, what, 300 billion rand. Now it's like 600 billion. I don't know, anyway. So this study was done by this guy, Bent Flyberg. He's a professor at Oxford, and he found that kind of all these mega projects always overrun. Now, the question is, why is that? Let's take the Olympics as an example. So very contemporary at the moment. We've got the Olympics coming up. The original budget for these Olympics was 4.8 billion euros. Now, let's not have the discussion about whether they are more cost effective than previous ones. We know that different Olympics spend different amounts, but consistently over the last 100 years, the Olympics always overspends. Now, it doesn't always run over time because there's a set date and they've got to get it done by then, but they always run over budget. Now, you'd think, like, why does that happen? Surely the previous person who did the Olympics or the people in the Olympic committee would have a file that goes, here's how you run an Olympics, here's what it costs, here are the overruns that we had. You know, you'd think it would get better as it over time. But if you go back to this example here, Sochi Winter Olympics 500%, Tokyo Olympics 600%, right? At the moment, France is doing really well. They're only on like 220% or something like that. But the games haven't started yet. And we're still counting, so they don't know exactly what it is. So, anyone want to guess? Why do they always overrun? I mean, these are clever people, right? Ellis, what's your theory?
It's just there's something, some of those projects, there are too many blind issues like the Concorde, and the other projects like the Olympics, there should be an example to work off. So they actually are two different scenarios.
But they all run over budget.
Totally. But when there's a lot of unknowns like the Concorde, it's more possible to run out of budget. But with the Olympics, you've got history to tell you which way to go.
So what happens is that exactly what you're saying. It's the stuff that's not known. So, you know, what often happens is, first of all, when we have a new project, we don't like to go back to the other guys and learn from their examples, etc. We get very excited about new stuff and the future. And whenever we're looking at the future, there's a whole bunch of unknowns that we're looking at. And so what happens is that, number one, we become naively overconfident. We look into the future, we imagine how fantastic this future is going to be. We get our teams together, we start planning, and we think about all the wonderful things. We'll talk a little bit just now about the positive thinking movement. But, you know, we are by nature most of us, very positive thinkers. You know, we are hopeful. You know, if you follow the work of 𝗂𝗏 he talks about kind of that's the difference between us and the Neanderthals, right? We could imagine a future that was different and go create that future. And that's a story that we told ourselves. So we can be naively overconfident. The other thing is strategic misrepresentation. Can you imagine if the minister who's in charge of the Olympics in France stood up 3 years ago and said, look, guys, we've done a whole bunch of work. We've got hundreds of spreadsheets. We've done all these things. We've looked at all these things. It comes to $4.8 billion. Please, will you give us $9 billion because we're going to overrun. We don't know what that's for. He won't be appointed. They'll kick him out. You want someone to stand up and go and be also the authority bias and stand up and go, I know what I'm doing. I can predict, and look, here's all the evidence. Here's all the spreadsheets that I've got. Here's everything that I've done. Think about in your own organizations, right? When someone's presenting a business case or something new you want to do. And you say, well, look, it looks very reasonable. And again, maybe he knows it or maybe he doesn't. But every minister of the Olympics gets up and has to say, look, you know, I'm confident that we are not going to run over budget. But then a whole bunch of stuff comes, which you can't predict. So what they should do is go, look, on average, the Olympics overrun by 200%. So what we should do is have the budget and then have a piece on top of that. But we don't work like that. And then the other one is motivated reasoning. Very, very, very powerful. In fact, Annie Duke in her latest book, and I've seen it before, says that there's a correlation between intelligence and motivated reasoning. The more intelligent you are, the more chance there is that you can come up with a good story and find evidence to support the thing that you want. So if you, Nicole, I'm going to pick on you again, right? You want to go work at 𝗙𝗵𝘃𝗀. It seems like a fantastic place. And so you will go in your decision-making, I'm not saying whether you did or didn't, I'm just using it as an example, and find evidence to support the decision that you want. And, you know, what always happens is, you know, one of the other ones that is my favorite is a hindsight bias. In hindsight, everyone goes, oh, I should have done this and you should have done that. And I told them 5 years ago that this should have happened. Anyone who's involved in community work will know that everyone comes up to you and goes, oh, you see, I told them. And it's like, well, where were you 5 years ago? Why didn't you email me 5 years ago to tell me what a disaster this is going to be? So, you know, we have all these biases that and motivated reasoning where we go and find the evidence. You know, we are pattern-seeking creatures. We can see the patterns in anything, even when there isn't a pattern. And so we can go find that evidence. And that's why, again, so going back to one of the other fundamentals, having a good process and making sure that we have different perspectives is critically important in order to help lower those biases. Okay. Let's look at what makes a successful entrepreneur. Pick this one because it was a whole long thing. 20 successful entrepreneurs share their best advice. Bill Gates, success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. So lots of this advice, right? And if you go to any talks by entrepreneurs, you will find the same lessons being said over and over again. You have to persevere. You have to have good social connections. You have to have a good business case. You have to do market research, etc., etc. One of the problems with researching successful entrepreneurs is that if you go and ask only successful entrepreneurs what made them successful, you don't know if that's going to be different to what the unsuccessful entrepreneurs had, right? So for the person who said, should I carry on with this business or should I shut it down? There's a book I want to recommend. It's called 𝗏𝗏, also by Annie Duke, by the way. I don't only read books by Annie Duke, but there's a book called 𝗏𝗏. Now, one of the interesting things is, so one of the things I do in my spare time is oversee some of the research at Gibbs. There was one of my students did a piece of research on failed entrepreneurs. So to speak, failed entrepreneurs. It was a difficult thing in order to see what that was, right? One of the things he found is that if you go and ask a whole bunch of entrepreneurs that are successful, they give you an answer. Let's take an example, perseverance, okay? All successful entrepreneurs will tell you that they persevered. It was tough, but they persevered and they pushed through. The problem is that when you go ask people who had ventures that didn't succeed, they'll tell you the exact same thing. And often what they'll do is they'll tell you, I persevered and persevered and persevered. And in hindsight, I really should have quit at a certain point because I persevered for too long. And so actually what you need to do is split out what are the things that successful entrepreneurs do have, and what are the things that unsuccessful entrepreneurs don't have, and those are the things. Okay, this is an illustration of what's called survivorship bias. So maybe a simpler example to illustrate it. People who go, you see, I didn't wear a seatbelt in the 80s and see, I'm fine. The reason is because the people who are not fine, because they didn't wear a seatbelt, are not around to say that they're fine. So, you know, there's a lot of this thing, especially in business research, where we go and research things that exist because we can't research the things that are no longer there. And so again, just one of the key biases to look at in this type of research is, or when thinking about your business is, and again, it goes to talk to perspectives, is, am I getting all the perspectives, or am I just looking at the perspectives that that I want? Okay. Any questions so far? I'm going to skip through that because of time, and I'm going to skip that. One last one, and then we'll get on to some of the frameworks. Magical thinking. This is a slightly controversial one because we all do it. Now, I've got this picture over here of this coach because we can all recognize it when it seems a bit silly. This guy, he was a basketball coach. He used to bite a towel while his team was playing, and he believed that if he didn't bite the towel, his team would lose. So he would sit on the side of the court biting the towel, right? Now, it's hard to imagine what the connection could be between biting a towel and his team's performance. So, you know, and we see it a lot in sports, right? Superstitions. I don't know if this group, Ellis, just pick on you again. Do you have a favorite sport?
No, not quite.
Not really. Anyone here a sports fan?
I'm getting it.
I don't want to be stereotypical amongst the men, but
He's got denture problems.
I used to be a cricket fan, but South Africa broke my heart like way too many times. And that's why I was actually quite glad to not have my heart broken the other day. So, you know, in sports, you see this a lot, right? Superstitions. So I did one of these talks once, and a guy he was this like giant, like 6'7" Norwegian Viking who's living in South Africa and working for an industrial company here. He told me that whenever he watches a soccer game with his football team, he always has a beer, and he can only open it when his team has scored their first goal. And he won't open the beer until this, because then it means they'll lose. And I said to him, I said, look, can you give me a rational explanation why you, sitting here on the tip of Africa, drinking or not drinking a beer, would impact how your team plays 12,000 kilometers away, or probably more? And anyway, you know, we had a bit of a laugh and that. And anyway, so it's like harmless, right? The challenge is when this kind of thing comes into business, okay? No, guys, I'm sure it'll be all right. Or, you know, you know, what are some examples in business, right? Like, or, you know, medicine. No, you know, I really hope this will be okay. Let me give you a different example. If you were, and this is, if you've read this, right, this is from this book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. See, I told you I read books that are not by any duke. So we all like, you know, there's this massive positive thinking movement. No, you've got to think positively. And the thesis of the thinking positive movement is that if you think positively, good things will manifest in your life. And even in, I didn't read it. There's a book called The Secret. For anyone who did read it, was basically that your brain puts out like magnetic waves into the universe, and it creates a better environment for you, etc., etc. There's a lot of religious stuff that goes in here. People saying, oh, I'm going to rearrange your sphirot using my Kabbalistic tools in order to think positively about the world. But I want you to imagine that you're getting on a plane to go overseas or locally, and the captain comes on and he says, look, you know, today, you know, last week I read a book about positive thinking. And so today, instead of doing the safety checks, what we did was me and the staff and the air hostesses and stewards got together on the runway, and we thought really positively about the plane flying to Cape Town and landing safely there. And we really think that this is going to have an amazing impact on your journey. I personally would get off the plane. So why then do we, I hope you guys would too, but why then do we, when we make decisions, do we use this magical thinking? We, you know, have, whether it's to do with our families or businesses, etc. Anyway, the idea is that when making strategic decisions, what's important is to think critically about them. One of my favorite exercises to do with people who are doing strategies is something called a pre-mortem. You guys heard of a post-mortem? So post-mortem is after the thing's dead, you go back and you see what caused the death. A fantastic exercise, let's again pick on Nicole, is Nicole's imagining going to work at 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗏. If she were to do a pre-mortem, she'd go, I'm going to actually stop and imagine that the thing is an utter disaster. What were all the reasons that this could be a disaster? And then she could think, well, you know, this reason, that reason, etc. And then what you can do is you can plan and say, hey, you know, like in the interview, look, there is one thing that concerns me. Can I speak to you about this? Very, very useful exercise in business to do this pre-mortem exercise, because what it helps is you say, okay, look, we've got this business that we're launching. What are all the things that could go wrong? And let's imagine that it all has gone wrong, because it helps to put yourself in the future. And then you can think to yourself, okay, the reason why we went wrong is like, guys, we didn't meet regularly. Okay, let's have regular meetings to make sure. Or we didn't do safety checks or something like that. Okay, awesome. Now you can put that kind of thing in place. Okay. Any questions? No? I'm either doing
I'll just say that
Yes.
analyzing the negative is positive thinking.
I agree. I agree. I'm going to skip to this now, just because yeah, time is running away from us. What is the point of all this? So again, there's lots of recommended reading about biases, etc. Two major takeouts. The one is intellectual humility. So for me, that is an absolute cornerstone of strategic decision-making, strategy, coaching that we do. Intellectual humility means I'm not the cleverest person here and I might be wrong. And unfortunately, we live in a world where the heroes that we have don't represent this. So the movies people make, the books that we often read, the stories we tell our children often have this hero who's super confident. In fact, it's also one of the biases, confidence, the illusion of confidence, where, you know, because people seem to be confident, we rate them much more highly. So, you know, for me, again, fundamental concept, intellectual humility. The other one is just to realize that we are all biased. If you have a brain, you're biased. So it doesn't matter how clever you are. In fact, the more clever you are, you might be even more biased. It doesn't matter what society you come from, whether you're religious or not religious, we're all biased. And so therefore, we all need these checks and processes in order to help us make better quality decisions. Let's jump into some of the frameworks and processes. So again, you know, I think it's interesting. A lot of this, you know, behavioral economics. If you go read any of the books by Daniel Kahneman or Dan Ariely, etc. Apparently, you know, in order to be successful in behavioral economics, you either need to be Dan and Israeli or a good poker player. So, but you know, you can have all these biases, but actually what's more important, and this is a great book by this Frenchman, 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗏. It says, you're about to make a terrible mistake. That's the positive thinking that Ellis referred to. He says, obsessing over our own biases is a waste of time. So again, knowing all these biases, what does that help us with? Number one, just, I know I'm biased, but nobody I know, even in Texas, sits with a list of biases at the end of a decision and goes, okay, you know, did we have confirmation bias? And did we have motivated reasoning? Did we have survivorship bias, et cetera, et cetera? The more important thing is to actually build processes that cater for mitigating all those biases. And in the book, he speaks about, they did the study where they found that having a better process is 6 times more powerful than doing analysis. So if you've got a decision in front of you, what can bring you 6 times more value on average in these investment decisions is not doing more research and more analysis. Obviously, one has to do research and analysis, and that's often where we go to. But if you have X amount of time to spend on this decision, what's more important is actually to work on the process rather than to do more analysis. And let's see exactly what that might look like. So this is the first thing to think about in terms of processes. So in organizations, and let's talk about this specifically from an organizational point of view, but you can think about it from a personal point of view, from a family point of view. There's two types of complexity that we find when facing a decision. The one is at the bottom here, I'll talk through this first, is analytical complexity. So interestingly enough, what happened was when the area of decision science arose, all the emphasis was on analytical complexity, and they have the most intricate, unbelievably complex decision analysis tools for assessing decisions down to, the 2000th decimal point. And what happened was that they, in the 1970s, that's where it was all going. And then by the 1980s, they said, how come we're still getting some of these decisions horribly wrong? And what they realized is that there's another complexity that organizations face, and that is called organizational complexity. And that's all the people stuff. So the analytical complexity is all the data and the research and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got organizational complexity that makes things much harder because there are people involved, and there's feelings involved, and there's egos involved. So if you have something like that's low analytical complexity and low organizational complexity, so, I've had a couple of drinks, should I Uber home or should I drive home? Let's just go with the rule of thumb. It's best not to drink and drive. Okay, cool. And we've all got these kind of rules of thumbs. And over our lives, we go through these things and we learn better and we can update our rules of thumbs, etc. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. When you've got something that is analytically very complex, so should we sink this mine shaft here or over there? Or should we buy business A or should we buy business B? Or should I invest in this pension and retirement fund or that fund? All you really want to know is what is the number that's spit out at the end, and have I done good analysis on that? And so therefore you have this whole area called decision analysis. I am by no means even remotely an expert in that. You want to talk to someone with an engineering background if that is your passion. I started reading this textbook about it. I couldn't get through the first 2 chapters. Okay, I did a course through one of the courses I did through University of Texas was this modeling for uncertainty. Honestly, was completely lost the vast majority of the time. You're dealing with a whole bunch of doctoral engineers that are dealing with stuff. Anyway, so that's not where I specialize. However, what often happens is that you get to the end, you get to the answer out of A, B, and C. A is definitely the right way to go. And now you can't get people to agree. Why? Because you didn't ask this guy's opinion, and this lady, the way you spoke to her wasn't nice, and you didn't phone this person, or the way you phrased this wasn't good, or this person wasn't invited to a meeting, etc. And so what's actually really important there is what we call facilitative leadership. And, I see organizations struggling with this a lot. And often what you need is not so much an analysis in order to get to a good decision, but taking people through a process. And again, this is where process becomes very important. Do we have a process where we can engage with people, understand their expectations, understand their perspectives, bring them along on the journey, and then get to a decision that people are going to support? Sometimes you have both, and then you have, we won't go into this in this course, what's called a full decision process, or the decision dialogue process, as the guys reference in their book, Decision Quality. And that's where basically you would have quite a lengthy process to bring people along, and a decision analysis process to make sure you got all the data right. Any questions on that? Okay. How are we doing for time? Let's talk about this. What's more important, the decision or the implementation? Tell you what, if you think the decision is more important, Do a 1. If you think the implementation is more important, do a 2. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, everyone says 2, right? Other than Yannicka, because she's seen this before. Okay, who thinks this is a complete setup like the previous one? You can hold up a 3. Okay. So now I'm completely setting you up, guys. Setting you up here. When you're building a house, is it more important to have a good architect or to have a good builder? Have a good builder, right? Well, what you should do is have both. So everyone, you know, what I hear a lot is, 3, right? 1 and 2, right? What I hear a lot is, you know, especially you work in strategy, everyone tells me, you know, guys, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and execution eats strategy for breakfast, and implementation eats strategy for breakfast. So, you know, everyone's eating strategy for breakfast. Must be really good for you. But the point is that you can have both. Okay. And we'll skip that. Here's another 2x2 for you. If you have a poor decision and poor execution, sorry, the thing's hidden here, and poor implementation, you're basically going to be running around like headless chickens. And, you know, again, this happens in a lot of organizations. We're doing lots of stuff. We're busy. There's always too much to do. There's so many meetings. We're sitting in meetings the whole day, right? All my clients tell me, oh, we're too busy, back-to-back meetings the whole day, et cetera, right? And that's obviously not good. If you have great decision processes, but you never do anything with it, which for me actually is a bit of a contradiction in terms, you can land up like this friend of mine here who just sits there and thinks the whole day, which again, you know, 2,500 years ago, if you're a Greek philosopher, that's awesome. Or even today, if you're a philosophy professor, that's fantastic. But it's not really going to get you anywhere. You may be really good at implementation. We just do stuff. But the problem is, you know, and I once worked at an organization where they quite proudly said that that we do ready, fire, aim. Let's just try stuff. Now, again, like often what you'll end up doing is shooting yourself. So, you know, if you're going on holiday and you're trying to get from Joburg to Cape Town and you don't know, like, let's not check which flight it is. Let's just go. Let's just start driving in a direction. Let's not look at direction. Let's not use Waze. Let's just go. Well, you might be getting further and further away from what you're actually trying to achieve. So the idea again is to start thinking about things in ands and not ors. So it's not decision or implementation. It's both. Okay. So again, thinking through this in organizations, just to summarize, would be number 1, we're facing a decision, and that would be like kind of one of the most important things is to go, we are decision makers, and if we're executives in an organization or in a family, and our most important job is actually to make decisions. Number 2 is this decision analytically complex or is it people complex? If it's people complex, I need to take people on the journey and not just sit doing my spreadsheets. Or it might be both. And almost always there's a huge amount, especially today, there's a huge amount of people complexity. And then let's focus on both. Let's have a good decision and then let's implement well and make sure we get stuff done. Okay. I want to just take you through this very quickly now for the next 30 minutes. And then what we're going to do is next week on Tuesday, we're going to work through this with some of your decisions, and I'm going to give you a one-pager, but I want to try familiarize yourself with concepts for now. Just before I jump into this, again, any questions, comments? No? All good. Making sense so far? So one of the key fundamental concepts in this book is decision quality. We often think about decisions as good decisions or bad decisions. And again, I completely set you guys up right at the beginning, asking you about good decisions, bad decisions. The truth is that we shouldn't be thinking about good decisions or bad decisions. We should be thinking about quality decisions. How can we increase the quality of our decisions? Because again, we don't control the outcome, and we don't always know what would have happened if we had chosen something different. So We don't actually know whether it was a good decision or bad decision. Maybe if Nicole hadn't decided to go work at 𝗬𝗏 she would have been in a different place and picked up a lottery ticket and become a billionaire and I don't know, whatever it is, right? So you never know. Maybe it was a bad decision, maybe it was a good decision, but it sounds like you went through a high quality process, and that's important. So you went through a high quality decision and you got to work with Viv, which is fantastic, right? So there's 6 elements to a quality decision, according to these guys. And you'll see that name there again, 𝗙𝗵𝗁, his whole team. They're the ones who run this organization called SDG, Strategic Decision Group, at the University of Texas. They lecture there, they work there, they advise kind of some of the largest companies in the world on their decision stuff. The book's pretty dry, but I've got basically summarized it for you here. And that's kind of the problem with this whole area. You know, the really interesting books are not very practical, but the practical ones are a little bit less interesting. So let's jump into this. So again, just for the next 26 minutes, because there's a poll at the end, which we do want you to quickly fill out. For the next 26 minutes, I just want to quickly take you through this. And then what we're going to do again, as I said, is I'm going to provide you with a one-pager next week so that you can work through your actual decisions. Okay. So let's jump into it. The very first and probably one of the most important parts, although I'll probably say that about all of them, but let's say that for now, right? One of the most important parts of a decision is framing a decision. So often what happens is we have a decision on our hands. Should we close the company or not? Should we go take this new job or not? Should we go move to Cape Town or not? We jump into research. Let me start Googling property prices in Cape Town. Let's stick with the moving to Cape Town thing because I'd love to move to Cape Town and do more trail running. So, you know, okay, let me look at property prices and let me look at schools and let me speak to people and get their opinions, all this kind of thing. But what happens is then you land up with a whole bunch of information and then you're like, well, what do I do with this? So the important thing is to start with what's called an appropriate frame for the decision. What is it that I'm trying to achieve? And there's 4 major parts to the frame of the decision. The first one is the purpose. What is the purpose of my decision? Let's say if I'm trying to move to Cape Town. I want to move to Cape Town, or I'm deciding whether to move to Cape Town or not. If I want to be an international trail runner, and that's my purpose, that's going to be very different to I want to have more time with my family, okay? If I don't clarify this with my wife and we move down to Cape Town, then I start spending days on end on Table Mountain trail running and then going overseas, compete. You can see what my dream is, right, in my next life. You know, traveling to Mont Blanc to go do trail running. And she thought the purpose of the decision was so that we could live a more balanced life and spend more time together as a family. That's going to be very different things. And so we might both agree on the decision to move to Cape Town, but with very different purposes. So really, really important up front. What is the purpose? And I find this so powerful, especially when, let's take the example of someone who said, should I carry on with this business or should I close this business? What is the purpose here? What is the purpose of this decision? What is the purpose of the business? Is it just, and again, I know nothing about that case. Is it that this is a lifestyle business that is trying to support me and my family? And then again, like, what are the chances that it's actually going to be able to do this if it's really struggling? Or maybe no, this business is really my passion and my purpose, and it's there to change the world, and it's a social entrepreneurial venture that's going to change people's lives. Actually, even if there's a low chance that it could succeed, I'm going to go with it. Again, so really important upfront, what is the purpose? The second thing is, what is the scope? What is the scope that we're talking about here? What is in the decision and what's not in the decision? That's why it's called a frame. You know, a frame tells you what's inside the picture and what's outside the picture. Although these days now you get those like kind of giant frames of the tiny picture. So maybe don't use that example. But, you know, the frame tells you what's in and out. So I'm moving to Cape Town. What is inside? What is outside that frame? Well, how long are we moving to Cape Town for? Or is it in scope to would I consider living in Somerset West? Or does it have to be in Seapoint? Or, what am I considering? What I'm specifically taking off the table that's not an option here. So the person who's thinking about closing their business, etc., what is out of scope here? I'm not considering going and getting another job, or I'm not considering starting another business. It's either this business or nothing. Those are the kind of things that are going to be in scope. Getting people's perspectives is really, really important as part of it. So again, purpose, scope, perspectives. Whose perspectives do we need to take into account in this decision? Moving to Cape Town, need to take my wife's perspective into account, my kids. Do they want to go to 𝗪𝗺 or not? Do they want to move to Cape Town or not? How important is trail running in their lives? What about my parents? What about my wife's sisters and how upset they're going to be that we're moving to Cape Town? So, what often happens is you make that list and it's like, wow, that list is actually a lot longer than we thought it was going to be. And so it's really important to go get those perspectives. Once you've got those perspectives, what's important, and this is what I'll challenge you to do next week, is to actually write down the decision. Because sometimes, again, if maybe let's actually pull it up here. Have a look at this one here, work-life balance. And this is not a criticism. That's not actually a decision. That's a goal. The goal is to achieve work-life balance. What is the actual decision I'm making? So often what happens is, and I challenge myself to do this often, where I'm like, okay, write down the decision in words on a piece of paper or on a slide. And then go, is that the right decision? Often what happens is once you go through the framing of the decision, you go, actually, it's not about work-life balance because that's my goal, but the decision is, have a look here, continue with work or focus on family life. The way that decision is framed is two choices, and it's like all or nothing. Should I work or family life? Well, okay, maybe there's a whole bunch of ranges in the beginning, and maybe there's a whole bunch of different options. We're going to get to the options just now. But so the important thing is to go, am I framing the decision properly? And again, how to do that practically, write the decision down. And then when you come back next time after the frame exercises, talking to people perspectives, you rewrite the decision to go, to what extent should I cut back on work in order to spend more time with my family? Something like that. Make sense? Okay. That's the frame. Once you've got the frame, it's still not time to go do research. Then it's time to generate creative alternatives. So this is often something that, again, we leave out. We like to, it's one of our biases, we like to think in binary. We like to think in options, A or B, as opposed to a spectrum or as opposed to a whole bunch of options. And often if you frame the decision properly, you can say, well, what are all the different creative alternatives? Maybe instead of moving down to Cape Town, I should just invest in a holiday flat in Cape Town and spend 3 months there trail running, in November, December, January. Maybe that's an option. So you can start thinking of all different creative options that would actually serve the same purpose. And again, that's where the purpose comes in. You're going to test it against that purpose. You can say, okay, well, the purpose is actually for me to spend more time with my family. So we don't actually have to move to Cape Town for that. I could actually start working from home, or I could get another job so that I'm less stressed and it's nearer to my home and I can do lift schemes, etc. And so actually what you do, and this is where intellectually this can be quite hard, is you start saying to yourself, well, but I really don't want to do this work because actually I just want to move to Cape Town, right? But it's important at this stage to go, what are all the different alternatives and creative alternatives? Sometimes when you're looking at the different perspectives of people, you're also going to generate those alternatives in order to achieve whatever that purpose is. It's really important to have credible alternatives. If you only have one alternative, then you're not actually making a decision. You're just going with one thing. So you have to actually have credible alternatives. Well, should we move to Cape Town? Should we move to Sea Point? Should we move to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏? Should we move to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏? Should we stay here and get another job, etc., etc.? If it's like, you know, a whole bunch of like, should we move to Sea Point or should we go live on the moon? Then that's not really a decision. Okay. So you've got your frame. Now you've got creative alternatives. Now you can go do research. Because now what you can do is go say, okay, what information do I need in order to better understand how successful each of those alternatives will be for me? If I go live in Sea Point, okay, now, what are the prices there? What's the commute to the schools? Which schools would we go to? What's the quality of education? What is the shul like there? How many people go to that shul? Do I like those people, etc., etc.? Should we stay here and I'll get another job? Well, okay, let me go look at other jobs. So again, if you start doing that research up front, when you haven't framed it properly, you're going to do a whole bunch of research that is not relevant. And there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff you're not going to look at because you haven't thought of those alternatives yet. So the next thing, again, is relevant and reliable information. So relevant, it's actually relevant to showing you whether that's a credible alternative or not. And then again, reliable. Are we checking our motivated reasoning? Are we checking whether we're just asking the people we know will tell us to do what we actually really want to do? Or are we actually asking people who are going to challenge us in our perspectives and give us their honest opinion? What's also really important here, and we'll touch on this next week, is trying to, and again, it's not something we naturally do, is trying to put specific probabilities to these alternatives. So let's jump to that quickly and I'll talk you through it. So this is from Annie Duke's new book, which is called How to Decide. So option one, I'm going to move to Cape Town. What are the potential outcomes that will happen from that? Well, I think either I'm going to move to Cape Town. It's going to be just the best thing ever. I'm going to trail run on the weekends. I'm going to walk with my wife and kids on the promenade. It's just going to be amazing. Outcome two, the leader of Hamas comes to live in Cape Town, and now I can't walk on the promenade because he's there in the promenade every morning. And so I'm desperately unhappy. Or outcome number three, the weather during the winter in Cape Town really gets to me. And I really hate that like kind of weeks of rainy weather. And so, you know, whatever it might be. Now, again, just in case you think I haven't prepared this. Once you put a probability to that, you know, often when we think, well, you know, there's two outcomes, in our minds, there are two equal outcomes. And so what happens is that you start to go, okay, but look, if I can put a probability to this, and it's just a guess, okay? But guessing is better than nothing. So you know what? 70% probability, I move to Cape Town, I love it there, the job is a success, I live a more balanced life, 70%. Okay, am I willing to take this decision and do that based on a 70% probability? And then I can do lots more research to support that. Or do I want to say, no, look, this 10% is actually so significant that I don't want to do that. Or maybe I would have thought, you know, these tourists are really going to get to me, especially the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏s that come down in December, and, you know, I'm not going to be able to deal with that. So again, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. What is the probability? And, you know, if I say, okay, look, actually, if I add the 70% and the 20%, 90% chance this is going to be good. Okay. And so that would be over here under relevant and reliable information and creative alternatives. So that would be just some of the practicalities of how you do these two things. Okay. Any questions so far? No? I'm not measuring. I see there is a whole bunch of stuff in the chat. But
David, I just wanted to ask a question. Yes. The quality of your decisions when it's an echo chamber in your own head versus maybe actually taking this and engaging with other people for these particular perspectives right from the get-go. What do you feel about that? Do you start on your own and then take it to other people who can also add value to this quality decision?
So let me go back up here. You know, if it's like a small decision, like where should we go for dinner tonight, then you know, then just like ask everyone, right? If it's a very large decision, right, like this, you know, like there's a lot of complexity here, then, you know, especially an organizational decision, then what you want to be doing is actually bringing people along on the journey right from the beginning. So the appropriate frame needs to be agreed with all stakeholders. So let's say there's a massive change that you're going in your organization. If let's say I as the leader come along and I go, okay, guys, here's the frame, here's the alternative, these are this is the information I've gathered, and therefore here's my recommendation. Someone might go, yeah, but that's not the purpose of the decision. For me, the decision was something completely different. So I think the more important decision, the more important it is to get that done up front. Now, you know, I've kind of started using the stuff, you know, to make decisions, but just like as a check in my head. But again, that's for like smaller decisions. So, maybe, you know, without being pithy about it, you know, not the supper, but, you know, which pair of running shoes should I buy, right? It's like, okay, well, this is just an example that I had, right? It was like, should I buy one of these new fancy running shoes that everyone's running in with like 3 carbon plates and a spring and all that kind of thing? And I was like, well, hold on, what is my purpose here? My purpose here is to not be an internationally renowned runner. It's just to be healthy, run regularly, not be injured, etc. So actually, it's not worth taking the risk for trying to, you know, increase my speed so much. So actually, you know what? I'm just going to stick with others. So again, like just to go back to your question, Viv, you know, bring people along on the journey. I will just also jump to this one. We'll go back to the clear values and trade-offs just now, but what you're also talking about, the, you know, the echo chamber is, you know, the sound reasoning. And again, like one of the things I'd encourage you guys to do is, you know, compare your Twitter or X feed with someone else's and just see how different they are. The echo chambers that we're in without realizing that we're in is just astounding. The amount of information that the internet is pushing to us, that whether you spend lots of time on social media or not, that you know, that reinforces our current beliefs and perspectives is just really, really immense. And so even though we've got a whole bunch of these tools to go out and explore other perspectives in the world, they're actually landing up doing the opposite. So, you know, especially in a big organizational decision, you want to be, you know, making sure there's sound reasoning, making sure that we're got checks and balances, making sure we're getting other people's perspectives, making sure that we've got a decision process. You know, just something as simple as like what I used earlier with 𝗪𝗠𝗄, getting people to put ideas forward anonymously is an exceptionally powerful tool for making sure that we don't have groupthink. You know, sitting in a boardroom and saying to people, do you agree? And saying, oh, I gave them a chance to disagree with me, is not encouraging sound reasoning. It's encouraging groupthink and, you know, uniformity. So especially in organizations where there's a bit of a fear culture, you know, etc. But, and yeah, just a point on that, you know, in our organizations are set up as hierarchies. And so there's, whether you like it or not, there are power dynamics there. And so people won't say they're, you know, what they truly believe. And so one has to find ways of making sure that we have solutions that aren't too simplistic, that we aren't, you know, going through, you know, just the process for the sake of it. And then, yeah, you know, something that always comes up when you talk about these things is analysis paralysis. Often what happens with analysis paralysis, in my view, and just from what I've read, is, and what I see in organizations, is that people jump straight into the analysis and we don't know what we're looking for. And then they're like, oh, we can't make decisions, right? As opposed to going, guys, this is an important decision. Cool. If it's an important decision, we think we need a month to make this decision. We're going to meet on this day and this day and that day. We're going to update. This is the person responsible for it, et cetera, and having a proper process to go through it. Just with 6 minutes left, I just want to quickly talk about these last two. But again, I'm going to go through this again next week, and I'm going to ask you to think through a decision that you've got so that you can work through it. Clear values and trade-offs. This talks a lot in terms of the frame to the purpose, right? What are our values? Do we understand what the hierarchy of those values are? And what are we willing to trade off? So again, like there's lots of books on this, but it's a really, really useful exercise to actually go and sit, you can Google it. There's values lists. You can do that whether you have values in your organization or not, and whether everyone understands what they mean or not. You should have like, for me, the recommendation would be like kind of non-negotiables. I'm moving to Cape Town, but absolute non-negotiable is I'm going to live in Sea Point because that's where, I want to live or something like that. What are my non-negotiables that I'm going in with that are absolutely, valuable to me? And then to have prioritized values of going, someone from Cape Town actually gave me an excellent example of, sorry, I talk about Cape Town a lot. I don't normally do that. But the example I had that the guy gave me was that in their organization, they had two values. The one was generosity and the other one was fairness. Now, again, if you just think about those, yeah, sure, those sound like good values. The problem was that people kept on coming and asking for student loans and other types of loans and saying, look, you said you were going to be generous. And then they had to go, well, but can we do it fairly? And then they had to go, guys, what is more important to us? Is generosity more important or is fairness more important? And they came to the conclusion, look, we would rather live in a fair environment than a generous environment. And so we are going to be generous, but as long as it's fair. And again, often those things only come up when you really challenge them. But having those abilities to make those clear values and trade-offs is really, really important, because otherwise, those are going to be your criteria to actually make the decision. So once you've gone through all these things and you've got your creative alternatives and you've got your reliable information, then you're going to be able to say, okay, cool, but what am I willing to trade off? Okay, we can go live in Cape Town, but I've got to take a job and I've got to take a pay cut. Am I willing to do that? Well, yes, I'm willing to earn 20% less if I can spend 20% more time with my kids. Fine, let's do it. Or no, I'm not willing to do that, etc. And then lastly, just sound reasoning. Again, we spoke about sound reasoning. Commitment to action. It's also one of the key things that helps with analysis paralysis. When you start the discussion, and this is why it's a circle, not a linear line. The commitment to action is with the appropriate frame. Are we actually committed to action here? Are we willing to put the time, the energy, the budget? And one of the key things here is whose decision actually is this in the end? Up front, you've got to agree, guys. In our organization, and I like to summarize these in 2 ways. You can have consensus. Guys, we're going to keep going round and round until we all agree. Until we all, and like you think about a family, right? It's not, well, I'm going to decide. It's like, no, in our family, we're going to go round and round. We're going to talk about this until we all agree. And if we don't come to an agreement, then, we can't make this move. The other one would be democracy, some type of representation, all types of experiments with democracy going on in our country at the moment. What type of majority, what does it mean, etc. So, in our organization, are we going to do things democratically? Is it 50% plus 1? Is it 66%? Is it 75%, etc.? Very few organizations, I think, really work like that, but most countries seem to. Well, whether they work or not, I suppose, is a matter of opinion, but they keep on going. So, and then, you've also got autocracy. Autocracy might be like real autocracy. I'm just going to decide. So, Viv, what you spoke about earlier, I'm going to go through the process, etc., but then I'm going to decide. Or look, guys, you know, at a certain point, I'm just going to make a call. I've heard everyone's views, and often you'll see this in, especially in like community organizations or work organizations, where eventually someone goes, look, guys, I understand all the different perspectives. I value the perspectives that you are bringing, but I'm going to make a call because we have to go. And that's, again, really important, because if you have that commitment to action, then you're actually going to make a decision. And so, again, just I wouldn't think about this in a linear process of like, you know, step by step, and we'll see how to do it next week, make it practical for you guys. But, you know, have the whole thing in mind when you're going through it. And so right from the beginning, you're going, am I actually committed to action here? Is this something that I'm actually going to follow through and actually do? We spoke about that. And then one last point, and we can carry on talking about this next week. Where do emotions and feelings fit in? So you might have noticed I have a slight leaning towards the more blue, rational, process-oriented decision. You can ask my wife about that. But the reality is that a lot of what this processes do is take the feelings out. There's a lot of debate in the literature about, you know, should you go with your gut or shouldn't you go with your gut? And if you read Malcolm Gladwell, then maybe you should go with your gut, you know. But the point here is made by this guy, Antonio Damasio. He says, we're not thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think. At the end of the day, once you've been through this process, it's important to check your intuition and check how you feel about this and go, guys, like something just doesn't feel right here. Because then you're going to say, okay, all the subconscious stuff is going to be telling you something's not right. Let me go through it again. Or there's something I'm uncomfortable with here. And so really important, right? They've got this kind of 6-part decision framework in humbly, although someone told me the other day, 𝗙𝗍𝗻 said, you're not that great, you don't have to be humble. But I like to add in the stage 0 and stage 7, you know, number 1, realizing that we are making decisions, and then stage 7 going, how do you feel about the decision? And, bringing the emotions and gut into it. So that's been a bit of a whirlwind. I'm sure there's lots of concepts that you've hopefully grappled with today. There was a request there I saw to share some of the slides. I will share some of the slides with you. If it's useful, I can share them now for you to look through before next week.